So as you all know, the love of my life, well, Paddy is the love of my life, died. And then I got told to stop waiting for her to come and to walk alone for a while. So I've tried that, and it's been okay. It hasn't been too ghastly. And mainly I've been coddled and supported and all sorts of things. And then I had the shits with it and said, no, hold on a second. Why must I walk alone for a while when I actually don't feel like I have to? And my guides came back with a stinging response, which was, any toxic attachment must be rectified before you can walk together again. So I thought, okay. And they had a few other things to say, which was not for polite company. So I said, okay, now how can a relating that I regarded as being so extremely loving, and mainly purely loving, no egocentric behavior from the dog anyway, how can that be regarded as a toxic attachment? And they said, anything that you place before yourself is a toxic attachment. Firstly, it's an attachment, and then it is toxic because it replaces you in you. So I had to stop, and I went, okay, let's have this whole conversation. And it turned out to be quite interesting. So first, let's make a couple of things clear. Attachment in and of itself is one of the things that we release on the spiritual pathway, right? And we do that in terms of everything, not just our attachments to people and objects, but also to a specific train of thought, a specific way of being, attitudes, belief systems. Almost everything associated with the egocentric world, the spiritual life teaches us that we must learn detachment from that. But when it came to this relationship with Paddy and a whole range of belief systems, etc., within me, and they called it toxic, I was shocked to my tiny, well-painted toes about this one. Did you notice? Thank you. Hey, people, lighten up. Jeez, man, they're so heavy. They're like that roti Paddy didn't want. Anyway, I was surprised because I didn't think that my relationship with Paddy was in any way toxic except when she was doing her business. So, the festive season has come and gone, people, lighten up. Okay. So, firstly, there are degrees of toxicity. And toxic might be a harsh word to use in terms of Paddy. But then my guides made a very telling statement. They said, when others are afraid for you in your loss, it is toxic. And I had to sit up straight on that one because almost all of you had made a statement about that. And it didn't occur to me that this relating between Paddy and I, and even my possessiveness and ownership and over-attachment to some extent, okay, to a great extent, generating fear elsewhere would therefore qualify it as toxic. Generating anxiety, concern, anything that is of a negative, low vibration. And yes, we can argue that concern can come from love as well. But anything that makes somebody uneasy within themselves, that undermines an existing system, actually qualifies as toxic. So I was a bit taken aback by that. And then I let it sink in and I thought, maybe it's time for us to talk about what is it that makes an attachment toxic in its varying degrees. Because it would be very easy for me to turn around and say, but that's not my concern. If all of you are anxious or worried or whatever, that's your business. And that wouldn't be right either, because that would be a complete lack of compassion on my part. So I had to start paying attention to what is it. Firstly, the nature of an attachment. What is it in the nature of an attachment that makes it toxic to self, to the object of the attachment, and to participating energy systems? Now, if you listen inside of your head to how you relate to people and relate to things, one of the criteria for a fairly toxic relating would be when the object of your affection is placed before you in all things. Yeah? So I lived under all four paws. And that might have been, that was toxic to me, and maybe toxic to other people as well, in terms of them always having to come second or third, or, never being prioritized, in a sense. It doesn't mean that the love is less. It means that the implementation of the love is toxic. So make that distinction in your mind, that the loving energy is one thing, but the way I bring it into expression, the way I implement it, the way I might use it even as a weapon, is what now makes the loving energy toxic. In other words, love just is here, and when I process it through my ego self is where I create the toxicity. Okay? Okay. How are we doing so far? I'm learning to get simpler about this. Okay. Then, of course, there are other criteria. That this attachment, this bond, this connection, we have different words for it, because we never just call it an attachment in our heads. See, those of us who are on the spiritual pathway know that if we call it an attachment, then it's not a good thing. So we don't call it that, which is a clear indication that it's toxic. Yeah. And then, of course, when it becomes a statement of who you are, when it becomes part of your definition, right? And I realize that Paddy is part of my definition, because everywhere I go, people say, so, how are you? How's your dog? It's like if you're dating somebody and you go, before they used to say, so how are you? How's Japi? Now they go, so how are you? How's your dog? And it's like really tedious for me now, because I'm keeping having to say, well, she died. Then I have to listen to that whole story. And I find that toxic. So the ramifications of how my identity is established in other people's minds, and how it actually has a boomerang effect, because the last thing I want to do is have these conversations everywhere in the world. Beautician, hairdresser, butcher, baker, everything but Fatima's candlestick maker. Yeah? So I never even went to the vet. And they're like, how's your dog? And I said, she died. No, I meant the other one. Oh, yeah, I have another one. So it's been a system where every time I turn around, no matter how wonderful the loving energy, how we attach to things comes back and it finds you. If you're making limitations of yourself in order to accommodate something or someone, the object, then you have a level of toxicity happening. So for 4 years we've moved into the center, and for 4 years I've wanted to have these intensive meditation weekends, but all of the weekends are structured, or have been to date, structured around what Paddy would allow. Structured around her walk, structured around how many hours between, how long can she sit in this room for before she needs to move, before she needs to call from somewhere. How long can I be in this room for before I know I need to be present with her? So all of these considerations that become automatic in your mind and completely natural from a loving space then become an attachment. Now, I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that everybody become uncaring. And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that I would do it differently if she were here again. What I am asking, though, is that everybody start to observe how the way we attach to something actually starts to limit, hinder, and define your beingness and your doingness in such a way that the attachment then becomes toxic. And we do this with people. We have attitudes. I keep saying, nobody's going to love me like Paddy does. And I know that for a fact, and as a truth. But I also know that, inshallah, there'll be different kinds of love. Right? They'll not be the same because of that unique being. And nobody's going to love me like any one of you does either. Thank God. But they'll be different. They won't be more or less, but there'll be an experience of love that is amazing and wonderful in its own right. But a toxic attachment will say, well, nobody's going to love me like this, so don't anybody bother. Yeah? A toxic attachment takes you into extremes within yourself and creates a different kind of conflict with yourself. A toxic attachment allows for you to take abuse, toss that food bowl and chicken soup all over the place, and then forgive it with no concern for whether it's made you less or not. To even make excuses for it. Shame she's old and grey. No. Now, I know that I can safely use Paddy and I as the example because what the real toxic attachment or the toxic part of it for me was that when she left, I felt like a big part of me had left too. So for me, that was the toxicity. And I had to get busy gathering myself again and getting present with myself. And I even wondered whether I would be less at being me as the teacher and the counselor in the center because this God energy was no longer walking beside me. So that was the toxicity of it for me. And I had to work through it. But in our daily lives, when we have people in our lives who are possessive of us, people who have expectations of us, who make assumptions about who we are and how we should behave, and if we're doing that to them, then it's a toxic attachment. And it means that you're not loving them. And that's the scary part, because we do all of these things in the name of love. It's like launching a crusade in the name of love, for God's sake. So inside each and every one of us, we have to ask, in my attachment, and name it that, consciously name it that, if for any reason that person creates agitation in your mind, and you're checking your phone to check if they're calling you or messaging you or read your messages yet, it's a toxic attachment. Any kind of addictive behavior pattern that you bring to any relationship, whether it's your boss or your best friend or your neighbor or your partnership, it's toxic. And it's toxic first and foremost to you. Now, thank God Paddy didn't have text messaging or phone calls, right? And so there's a grace in that the communication is limited. In the human world, the communication is no longer limited. It is open in so many different ways. It is available in so many different ways. But it is not transparent in so many different ways. And the use of different forms of communication in order to get different messages across, instead of stabilizing and holding the focus on a specific conversation or a specific message, is in itself toxic. It toxifies the management of the dynamic called a relationship, the energetic exchange, the process between two people. And we forget that all relating is in fact a process. Yeah? It's not here today, gone tomorrow. For all of those people who ever fell in love, it's not here today and gone tomorrow. It's a process. It's a becoming. It's an exchange. It's a creating, step by step by step. And we bring our toxins into the creation of it because of the agitation in our minds. Now, this mind is powerful enough to create it better or create it worse. It is even powerful enough to let it unfold and create itself just by being present in the relating. So everybody I know has a whole conversation about their relationship in their minds before they have the conversation with the relationship. And I've recently said to people, I don't want anybody telling me where Paddy is and how she's doing and she's probably doing this or she might be doing that. Do not presume, do not preempt, do not probabilize, which is just not a word, by the way. Don't project, don't transfer stuff, don't do any of that stuff, because when the real thing comes around, you won't see it. You won't know it, you won't feel it, you won't be able to trust it, because your brain already has a series of experiences that it knows are fake. And that you are the one faking it.
And you're creating expectations.
Absolutely. Now you ask any woman who's faked an orgasm for most of her life, when the real thing comes around, she has no idea that that's happened. Why are you laughing at me? It's true. 84% of the women on the planet say so. Yeah. You just have to read the right books. And that in and of itself is an attachment. The expectation of a specific type of performance from somebody because you love them. And that's toxic in the extreme because it doesn't leave the relating open to the object of your affection. And mainly, the object of your affection is not an object. It's a being. It's a person. It's a soul. It's a growing, doing, making mistakes, driving you nuts, up the wall, crazy, lying sod. Oh, that one goes just because not one single man I've met has ever known not to lie. So, here's the thing. Women do it all the time as well. Yeah. But you know, I meet women who lie and then I forgive them. Just saying. Everybody lies. We lie about who we are in the world. We lie about how we perceive ourselves. If you're wearing a mask, you're lying. You're faking it. If you're very busy thinking that other people are thinking about you, then you're lying to yourself at least. If you're so concerned with other people's opinions and you're working to maintain an opinion, you're lying. All of this is toxic attachment in your relating to the world. But we can't fix all of that in one meditation. Much as I'd like to wave that magic wand, we can't fix all of that in one meditation. What we can do in the meditation, however, is open up your energy system so that you can recognize the thought processes that you bring to creating those toxic attachments. So every one of you can give me a thought, right? Almost instantaneously, you can come up with a thought that says, oh, that's my criteria for knowing I have a toxic attachment. Can't go without my husband's permission. Can't go without my husband. Can't do that without so-and-so. Yeah? It's like I'm not supposed to. So there's a rule in your head that suppresses you in order to accommodate something. And if we said, why not? Oh, I'm scared, he won't be happy, it won't be as much fun. There's always an excuse to rationalize the why you can't do it alone, why you can't do it with yourself. And then I want to know, well, then why are you breathing by yourself? You can breathe without that person. You can love without that person. You can use the toilet and have a bowel movement without that person. And for the women in the room, you are able to produce a child and give birth without that person. You can stand on your head without that person. And all of this is a matter of choice and a matter of nature. By our very nature, we are intended to connect. We are intended to interact. But we are not intended to attach. In plant life, anything that attaches is called a parasite. And that's what a toxic attachment is, parasitical. Because you're actually draining somebody of energy with your fear, with the toxins and the needs, the insecurities that are sitting inside of you. Right? No, it's okay to nod. Okay, thank you. Just indicate, right? Okay. Not funny. So when we talk about these toxic attachments, it's all very well to complain about it and talk about it, but then we want to replace it with something, right? We want to know, if I'm not going to do that, what am I going to be instead? So I don't know if you all remember, but a while ago, Patty had this whole thing where she was going, Granny, I'm serious. I'm so serious. I'm serious. Do you remember this? I think it was last year sometime, where it took me about 3 days to figure out that she wasn't being serious about anything, but she was saying she's serious. Was it last year or the year before? I am serious. The dog star.
Oh,
Yeah. And so over a couple of weeks, Patty and I had this whole conversation about the dog star. And then I think we did a meditation on it, right? And if I recall correctly, even Luendran had an input about the dog star and how it represents transformation in the world. But I distinctly remember around the same time as well, we had talked about the 0 to 1 binary number system, which is exactly how the dog star, which just very, by the way, is the brightest star in the cosmos, how that dog star is a binary star system. It has 2 primary stars that actually circle each other. They revolve and rotate around it. So they revolve in their own space and they rotate around each other in perfect harmony, exactly like the Shiv and Shakti energy, which at the time my Lord husband said was his, right? The twinkle in his eye, the dog star. Anyway, it was all very exciting. But as I was thinking about this, what would we replace these toxic attachments with? We would do exactly what Gibran suggested. You know, the pillars of the temple stand apart from each other to hold up the roof. The strings of the lute stand apart from each other in order to create music. Yeah. Everywhere there are spaces between things. And of course, because we're unlike the strings of the lute and the pillars of the temple, we are moving, evolving, growing beings of light, exactly like the binary star system in the dog star. We should be rotating, doing that wonderful ballet pirouette in our own space and evolving and spiraling up and simultaneously revolving around something else in harmony with it. And in fact, if you look it up, there is a Sufi physical meditation that people do in order to learn how to harmonize their energies with each other. And they're circling each other while turning around and spinning in their own space. So we must try this one of these days, right? Maybe that day. Anyway. So in your mind, if you imagine any relationship you're in, and you imagine it as being, firstly, separate from you. That soul is separate from you. The 2 points of the binary star system are separate from each other. But it is together that they shine the brightest light in the universe. It is not individually. If the one was not there, the dog star would no longer qualify as the brightest star in the cosmos. They have to shine together. Exactly like the Shiva and Shakti. Exactly like the male and female energy systems. Exactly like any two souls coming together in sacred contract. That's how the universe is intended to work. Exactly like you and God. So, if you imagine or intend or work with the understanding that every person in your life, and really they have to be in your life, they have to get up close and personal to create this kind of toxic relating, right? You don't create toxic relatings with strangers. Unless they're just point-blank angry ones. And that's not a relating. It's not an attachment that has a time span or a growth span or a assumption span. So all of these relationships, whether they're with people here or on the other side, or gone girl ones, wherever they are, they're still living inside of you. If their past relationships are not, they're living inside of you. So that's where you need to stop and take a good look at what are the attitudes and beliefs and actual limits, rules that you've placed on yourself in order to maintain this relationship, whether the object of your affection is available or not. Now, isn't that the weirdest sort of attachment? That we are attached to somebody who no longer is present. I have a lot of women who come here and they say, I can't possibly get over my ex. We were together for so long and we had such a wonderful, perfect relationship and I was so in love with him. And I say, did you have sex with him after the first night? Yes. Oh, well, now we definitely have to have this deep and intimate a contact in order to rationalize the fact that you did something that you thought you shouldn't have been doing in the first place. Women are not supposed to have one-night stands. So now we have to create this big emotional attachment in order to rationalize this and follow it up with several more one-night stands and call it a relationship. Oh, come on, we all know women who do that. Yeah. And so we create something toxic out of guilt, out of doing something that we're not supposed to do, out of a rule that really is ridiculous and patriarchal and chauvinistic and all sorts of other things. So there's a never-ending cycle of toxicity in the attachments, even as we're creating them. And you get to clean up those rules inside your mind. So no matter how great or how wonderful the loving is, the fact is that here, in the power of our own minds, we create toxins. We create that negative attachment that then denies the connection. And when it denies the connection, it actually shuts you down. It closes you off from your own potential. It closes you off from giving more of yourself in the relating, becoming more of yourself in the relating, enjoying, activating the joy of you in the relating. Because that toxic stuff is your limitation. It's your hindrance. It's got nothing to do with the other person. The other person can be turning cartwheels in the sky and you still have to make up your mind about it. So everybody knows how to say, I love you, but. Yeah, and that's where we should all put our feet in our mouths. Okay, so today's meditation is specifically about unlocking all of those attachments, whether they're past ones or current ones. Wherever you place them in the time zone is okay for me, but unlocking all of that and then letting them go, opening them up, right? So for yourself, while I'm talking, I want you to consider what are those thoughts that sit inside of yourself, and there's a whole spectrum of them, that actually creates your relating as toxic.